Welcome to the North American Hunting Odyssey, where members experience and share the Odyssey we call the hunt. This program has been created specifically for members of the North American Hunting Club.
Hi, I'm Bill Miller, editor of North American Hunter magazine, and your guide to this special edition North American Hunting Odyssey video series. We've created this series especially for you as a North American Hunting Club member. Our goal during the next 60 minutes is to try and share the total hunting experience with you from start to finish, including technical and environmental update features guaranteed to keep you abreast of the latest news in the world of hunting. All the while, keeping in mind that these hunting odysseys are dedicated to each and every one of you who helps keep the hunting and shooting sports tradition alive and growing all across this great land of ours. And in that same spirit, let's take the first step on today's hunting odyssey. We begin by looking at how sound affects most game animals and how you can use it to your own advantage. Now, when you think of the word sound and how it applies to hunting, don't just think of calling techniques such as gobbling to a big tom or bugling to a bull elk, because even as effective as they can be, sometimes calling doesn't fit the situation. In some cases, it just plain doesn't work on heavily hunted animals, and that's when these other methods can really pay off. Following that, we're going to share with you some great moments of field from videos sent in by your fellow North American Hunting Club members. Now keep in mind when you're watching this footage that while it may not be quite as crisp and clear as that shot by a professional with a $50,000 camera, that doesn't mean it's any less exciting to watch, as you'll see in just a little bit. And then our Odyssey takes us indoors to witness some of the most incredible high-speed, slow-motion photography that I've ever seen. If you're a bow hunter or an archery shooter, you'll be glued to your seat as you watch this action. And even if you've never picked up a bow and arrow, I know you'll still find this segment fascinating. After that, we're going to head out to the woods of Wisconsin for an up-close and personal look at one of the least understood game birds in all of North America. It's the Timberdoodle, more commonly known as the woodcock, you'll be hunting in this interesting segment. And then you'll laugh until you cry as you watch a young bow hunter catch his first case of buck fever. After that, our adventure series takes us to northern Quebec, Canada. Here, you'll join in the action as some of your fellow North American Hunting Club members witness the spectacle of the caribou migration across the rugged wilderness. And then you'll get an update from Wildlife Forever Director Doug Gran on a project you helped fund through your NAHC membership dues. And lastly, Club President Steve Burke will share his feelings on a subject that should deeply concern each and every one of us: the future of hunting itself and what you can do to help ensure its very existence. But first, let's head out to the woods and take a look at a little-known technique that I call flying down, as demonstrated by guide Jeff D'Agostino and his little hunting buddy Keith Jolly. Close your eyes for a second while I play back the sound of that beating wing for you. Incredible, isn't it? I would, however, be careful about using an actual wing, for obvious safety reasons, especially on public land in the dim light of early morning. Instead, practice with your cap or a seat cushion, and before too long, you'll have that sound down pat.
Well, he was behind that tree, but he started walking out to the other side of the tree, and then he said, "Squeeze trigger."
What's the first thing you saw?
That whitehead.
Was Mr. Jeff as nervous as you?
I doubt it.
Yeah, because he was talking to you and pushing the button, and that's because I wanted you to hear what was going on, Ronnie. Sit down, that's pretty good. Get in there, Dave. Look at that thing. Mr. Longbeard. That's a
Next is a series of hunts and a demonstration by a couple of elementary school kids on the effectiveness of the fawn distress bleat on early season deer. Listen and watch. Now, to be honest, this is not thought of as a big buck tactic, although I've seen smaller bucks come in to check out the bleat. But 9 out of 10 times, it'll be does that respond to it, often at a full run, and sometimes more than one at a time. One important tip on using the bleat call is to slow down your tempo as soon as you spot a deer. Otherwise, they come in a gallop, and as soon as they catch wind of you, they're gone, and so are your chances. And if you want to increase your chances even more using the bleat call, listen to the words of Will Primos, the inventor of the still bleat call being used here.
All right, it's our good friend Ricky Foster. This is a single doe, comes by herself. She comes in fast and never really stops. Jolly's slowing his calling down like he should be doing. Ricky's getting ready to take that shot, but she gets his wind. And that's it. Once they smell you, they're gone. This is Ricky Foster again. Can't hardly see that mossy oak there. Does a great job. This doe comes running right on in. Once again, Jolly is doing the calling, kind of tones the calling down, slows it down. Right about that time, that doe gets his wind. Ricky's got to shoot quick.
One other thing I'd like to say here deals with harvesting does and how it's been a proven, effective game management tool.
And she's down.
That's why some states offer bonus doe permits, special youth hunts for does, archery doe hunts, and others. So while you may consider yourself to be a trophy, bucks-only type of hunter, don't discourage others who feel that the trophy lies in the animal, whether or not it's sporting any headgear.
Great way to bow hunt during the early season. This setup's a good example that you should really take it easy on your collar once you see the doe. If you don't, she can run right over you.
blow it, damn you.
Just goes to show you, it's not hard to do.
And speaking of headgear, have you tried rattling for bucks yet? Hey, if you're one of those guys who thinks that rattling is just some kind of gimmick, take my word for it. It works. And noted whitetail biologist and North American Hunting Club whitetail columnist Larry Weishen will back me up on that one.
And essentially what we're doing with rattling is simulating a fight of white-tailed deer. In setting up, you want to go to an area where you can see a little bit around you. Bucks generally approach from the downwind side. In this case, the wind is blowing right over my shoulder. But even if they're coming in from behind me, they'll probably make a circle and come around and show themselves. Also in setting up, you want to set up in an area where you can see. Occasionally it's a good idea to use somebody that you trust, that you've hunted with quite a bit, get him a little bit out ahead of you and designate him as a shooter. Yesterday, before we got here, I had an opportunity to this particular spot to check out some of the sign here, and there's some rubs and especially some very active scrapes right back here in the background and back behind us as well. So we know that there's some deer in this area, especially some bucks. Those are very positive buck signs that you find during the rut, or as we're approaching the rut, as we are at this time here. Once you've selected an area, it's important that you use a good camo. Be sure that you cover your hands. Your hands have a tendency to look very bright to a deer at a long distance, and especially when you get one close. So don't forget about wearing a pair of gloves while you're hunting with rattling horns. Also use a good face mask. And even though I enjoy wearing a hat most of the time, while I'm hunting, whenever I set up to rattle, I'm going to take my hat off, put it somewhere where hopefully a deer's not going to be able to see it. I want to be sure my face is covered, so I'm going to use a face mask, which will still allow me to see, but will also blend in real well with the background. But you want to be real careful. Always set up, know who's in the area. If you're hunting in public land, by all means use a pair of rattling horns that is bright, that somebody can see. Wait a little while, wait for all the sounds of nature to come back. Usually they're crickets or they're birds or something in nature is out there making a racket before you come in or making a noise. Once those crickets start back or the turkeys start chirping again, then wait a little bit. There's several ways to rattle. Early in the season, bucks are still fairly timid. They're just starting to establish their pecking order. So when they come together, they'll walk around. They've been real big buddies until a couple of weeks ago. They come together and they're very timid to start with in their rattling. So this is what you want to do, is just really kind of like they're playing. They're not real serious yet. Rattle a few seconds, pull them apart, and kind of get ready. Another thing that you can do early on in the season is bucks spend a lot of time rubbing their antlers. And sometimes just the antler rubbing of a bush will produce a deer for you. So a lot of times what I'll do is when I go into an area, if I'm hunting the first part of the season when the bucks are just not even thinking about the rut, I'll spend a lot of time rubbing a bush. And the deer are fairly curious, so they're going to come in to see what other buck is in the area. There's a lot of discussion where antler development first started. Down in the southwest, they think some Mexican cowboy or some of the Indians down here started rattling. If you go up north, they say it was some Cree or Algonquin Indian that started rattling. It's not real important who initiated it. The importance is that it does work most of the time. Don't get discouraged if it doesn't work. We'll go through a short series of how we'd rattle early in the season. You can do some grunting along with it as you approach the rattling. But again, early in the season, those bucks are going to put their heads together fairly timidly, not real serious, and kind of push. And they're not going to do this for a long time. They'll do about like that, pull their heads apart, and then stand around and look to see who's watching. Because again, like they're trying to say, they're trying to establish their dominance at the very beginning. A lot of the antler rubbing is to strengthen the neck muscles. One of the reasons the buck's neck swelling as you approach the rut is because of all this activity that they're doing, of all the rubbing. After you've rattled for a while, and if you just sit around and wait for maybe as long as 20 minutes after you do your last little sequence, if that doesn't work, you want to pick up and move to another area if you've got the property in which to do it. Let's try a little bit farther down the road and see where we can rattle up. If it doesn't work the first time, you want to change locations. As a rut progresses, the fighting gets much more intense in white-tailed deer. During this time, they're very vocal, and during this time also, they do a lot of grunting. And if you have a grunt tube, use it. Do a lot of grunting. Do short grunts. Do the sound. Beyond that, when two bucks get together, they'll start circling each other, trying to determine their strengths and weaknesses. And about that time, just before they fight, one buck will make a noise. It's a snort wheeze, and it's a challenge saying, if you don't leave, you're going to get whipped. You want to use this in your rattling as you go into the rut, as it gets very serious. And it's a fit, sit, fee sound, and it goes something like, shortly thereafter, those two bucks are going to come together. And when they come together, they're going to come together with great force. And at the same time, they're going to tear up a lot of country. There is no way that one individual with a set of rattling horns can duplicate the sound of two big bucks fighting. But you want to try the best you can. It's one of the neatest ways in the world to hunt white-tailed deer, because the more noise you make, the better off you're going to be. We're going to go through a sequence and show you something what we're talking about. Remember, bucks' antlers are attached to two big bodies, so that you want to be sure to grasp them very tightly. Always be cognizant of what's going on around you. A buck can come in at any one time, or at any time, and he may come in from any directions. Sometimes the really big bucks are real slow about approaching. They'll hang out right along the edges of things, right along the edge of the brush. So you want to wait, take plenty of time. Young bucks, immature bucks have a tendency to come charging in. The old buster bucks with big racks have a tendency to lay back there and let the younger bucks come in first, but eventually they'll come in. So stay in a spot for about 20, 30 minutes after you finish rattling, even when you've made all the noise that you can. Rattling works for a variety of reasons. Some bucks come in to fight, some bucks come in to look, see what's going on. Nobody really knows for sure why it works. It's not important. What is important is that it does work. There's no more exciting way to take a big white-tailed buck than through horn rattling. When they come in, their eyes are bugged, their ears are laid back, their hair standing on end. There's just simply no more exciting way to take a deer like that.
Does rattling work? You bet it does, and this giant record book buck is proof of it. However, rattling deer into bow range calls for the utmost in skill and patience. And even with all of that in your corner, more often than not, the deer will come out on top. Boy, oh boy, talk about the one that got away. What a beauty. This next member-supplied video has to do with rattling as well. The only difference is, this is the nerve-rattling variety. NAHC member D.V. Smith from Knightdale, North Carolina, was on a black bear hunt in Saskatchewan last spring when he and his guide cameraman had a huge cinnamon-phased black bear come into their bait. Hunting with a bow dictated waiting for a close, broadside shot on this big bruin, so the wait was on. Seconds later, Another respectable bear is lured into the area, and now Mr. Smith is really getting anxious.
Smooth release. It'll be a while. You'll have to eat all that stuff. Think of it. It's nice if you turn right. Just don't rush. He'll turn sometime. Listen. You sure it's 10 yards? Maybe 20. Hey, just aim about 8. Too much harder. No, just aim right where you want it. Hey, don't shoot him until he gets turned exactly like you want. I've got so much stuff there, it might take him 30 minutes to turn.
The seconds soon turned into minutes, and the mosquitoes soon turned our hunter and guide into an all-you-can-eat smorgasbord. Suddenly, the big guy turned, and before Mr. Smith could get off a shot, the bear had wandered behind those trees and that barrel. At this point, I'm sure a lot of hunters would have been kicking themselves for not taking a shot earlier, but I applaud these gentlemen for using self-restraint and waiting for a clean shot. That's true sportsmanship. And when that cinnamon blackie finally walked off into the underbrush, I can only begin to imagine the disappointment they must have felt. And I'm sure at this point the smaller bear must have looked good to them. But now they were on a quest. It was that big cinnamon or nothing. And as luck would have it, their patience finally paid off. A few minutes later, he emerged from the woods and walked back to exactly the same spot he'd been before. But once again, they waited and waited and waited for a broadside shot. And if the phrase, "good things come to those who wait," ever applied to a situation, this was it. The bear turned, the archer drew, and the broadhead found its mark. Congratulations, Mr. Smith, on a great hunt and a spectacular trophy. And I've got a follow-up to that exciting hunt in a letter to the North American Hunting Club from Mr. Smith himself. D.V. Smith arrived at his stand approximately 3 p.m. with his hunting partner. It was a very clear, warm day with no wind blowing, very muggy, and a perfect day for black flies, and of course, black bears. About 5:30 p.m., a small black bear came into the bait site, which started the adrenaline flowing. Several minutes later, a 350-pound blonde cinnamon bear came to the site. And boy, did my heart start to pound in my throat, my knees began to quiver, the black flies were biting. And still, you try to settle down and wait for your best and perfect shot. The rest is history.
Oh, this is unreal. This is unreal.
Oh my God, this is unreal. Look at that. Oh, Bob, don't move. I'll run the whole thing on him. You getting pictures?
Now imagine yourself and a pal out in a nearby field watching the deer feed at dusk. This was something that NAHC member Bob Whitman from Erie, Pennsylvania had done countless times before. But tonight, he and his buddy were in for the surprise of their lifetime. Now I don't claim to be an expert on animal albinism, but I do know that very few wild animals with this genetic defect reach adult status. But that sure isn't the case with this buck. He looks every bit as big and healthy as the other deer in the herd. I would think that his lack of natural camouflage would make him an easy target for predators, including man. But from the looks of it, he's survived at least one hunting season unscathed. And for any deer in Pennsylvania to do that, he must be doing something right. But before you head out to go hunting, check the regulations about shooting white or albino deer in your own state. I do know that in some states they're protected.
There's the other buck. The other buck just come up behind him. Yeah, but you're not clear. Still recording? Yep. Your O's are still going across? Yep. Here he goes in the woods. That's it anyway.
Put this on and call it the Moose video. Okay. Buck is looking at Johnny.
This next video comes to us from NAHC member Gary Morrill's wife, Nancy, of Waterboro, Maine. For lack of a better title, I've dubbed it Love is Blind, or at least awfully nearsighted. It's the story of Maynard, the world's loneliest moose, and his short but steamy love affair with Gary's archery deer target. Now by my reckoning, either Maynard had led an awfully sheltered life, or he'd thrown all caution to the wind and decided that this piece of styrofoam was going to be the mother of his children. Forget the fact that this was a buck deer as well, because it certainly didn't seem to bother Maynard.
Oh, look.
What?
He likes Daddy's deer.
He was bound and determined to win the love and affection of his chosen mate. However, when his kind and gentle advances went unnoticed, he must have figured the now antlerless deer was more interested in the strong, silent type. And so as he began to pursue his heart's desire a little more aggressively, little did Maynard know that instead of changing the deer's mind, he was going to cause it to lose its mind. Now I know what they mean when they say, love hurts. Archery is one of the fastest growing participation sports around today. Whether you choose to shoot targets only or use your bow for hunting, your main goal is to shoot accurately. In bow hunting and in target archery, success is measured by the final results. If the arrow you launch strikes the precise point at which you are aiming and arrives there with enough kinetic energy to do its job, then it really doesn't matter what happened on the way. Accuracy, no matter how it is achieved, is the archer's ultimate goal. Our friends at Easton, who provided this high-tech footage for North American Hunting Club members, asked us to make it clear that they didn't put this film together to promote a particular archery setup, arrow type, or style of shooting. Instead, they simply sought to illustrate the incredibly complex dynamics through which all the components of the bow and arrow must pass during each shot. In setting up and tuning a bow for hunting or target archery, there are literally millions of combinations you could put together. Hundreds of releases, arrow rests, string types, sights, points, broadheads, and accessories are on the market. Catalogs from Easton alone reveal thousands of arrow materials, weights, and dimensions from which you can choose. Searching for the precise combination which works best for you and your shooting situation is a big part of the fun. It means you get to shoot more often. However, what Easton's footage graphically shows is that when you change even a single element, the whole system changes. For example, look carefully at this footage of an archer releasing with his fingers, but shooting a bow equipped with an arrow rest meant for shooting with a mechanical release aid. Look at that arrow wobble and the fletch strike the rest and riser. Now over time, you may be able to develop shooting habits to compensate for such erratic arrow flex, but it obviously would be much simpler and easier to search out properly matched components from the very beginning. Just look at some of how these arrows bend like wet noodles as they leave the rest. This footage will also give you great insight to the difference between shooting wheels and cams on a compound bow. The use of a cam bow increases arrow flex, which plays a role in making a decision on the type of arrows, the weight of arrows, the use of release, and everything else. Again, it's one element changing the entire system. Perhaps this footage will help you make a decision about whether to shoot with your fingers or a mechanical release aid. There's no question these sequences show that on properly matched gear, the arrow leaves the bow with less torque and flex if it's released with the assistance of a mechanical aid. But in making the final decision, hunters must never rule out the convenience and speed of finger shooting, and the fact that with fingers you aren't trusting in the reliability of a mechanical device. For the bow hunter, it all boils down to this last sequence. This is a properly tuned hunting rig which shoots a broadhead-tipped arrow like a rocket from a launching pad. Look at that. No flex, no bend, no fletch contact with the riser or rest. That's the kind of shot that will hit a trophy buck or bull just where you aim. Isn't that some amazing footage? I recommend you watch it several times and draw your own conclusions from it. Also, don't think you can head out to the range with your bow and camcorder and try to duplicate what you just saw. A special 16mm camera running at 7,000 frames per second with a shutter speed of 1/35,000th of a second was used to capture those arrows in flight just so you could see the dynamics involved in shooting a compound bow. Fascinating, wasn't it? And quite honestly, I think you'll find this next piece just as interesting, only in a slightly different way. Wisconsin resident Mark Nissen is going to take us on a Timberdoodle hunt into the pine and aspen woods of the Badger State. What's that, you say? What's a Timberdoodle? Well, stick around and you'll find out.
Pitch it up. Pitch it up. Nikki, come. Pitch it up.
The woodcock is found in 37 states, though its primary range lies east of the Mississippi. The upper Midwest is where we will be doing our hunting. It's October and early November when they will be passing through this region. The peak flights vary from year to year, similar to waterfowl migrations, which are basically dependent on the weather. In the hunting of woodcock, locating cover is often the most difficult part. If you have a good dog and the proper equipment, the rest of the job is relatively simple. In general, the woodcock will be found in areas near water, as the ground must be soft and damp to allow probing for earthworms, which makes up the bulk of the bird's diet. Low-lying leafy covered areas in young woods and thickets near streams and swamps is where you'll find this bird of many nicknames such as Timberdoodle, Swamp Robin, Frogsucker, or just plain Doodle. Feeding areas can be verified during daylight hours by watching for probe holes and droppings, commonly called chalk or splash. Though hardly a romantic pursuit, you should be constantly on the lookout for signs. Even if you don't find birds there today, mark it on your map for future reference. During the migratory season, doodles might stop in a cover for only a matter of hours. Other times they could hang around for weeks. The cold north wind will tempt them to move along or bring a new flight into your favorite spots. South-facing hills collecting sunshine near feeding areas are prime resting spots for migrating birds. While on their journey, they tend to loosely follow north-south running creeks, rivers, and even roads. If you find a young aspen cover in combination with one of these features, it's well worth investigating. Remember that woodcock are very susceptible to overhunting. They hold very tight and rarely fly far when encountered, allowing you to easily relocate flushed birds. Never take more than a few from any one cover. You can count on prime hunting there for years to come.
Now that you know that a Timberdoodle and a woodcock are one and the same, let me tell you from past experience, those little guys are probably one of the most challenging upland game birds I've ever come up against. They've certainly provided me with many hours of extremely frustrating but equally pleasurable fall hunting. And if ever a fall hunt was to prove itself frustrating to the point of laughing out loud, it's our next adventure. So come on along and join young Will Reeves on his first archery deer hunt. This one will kill you, unlike the deer. Just in case you didn't see where Will's arrow went, take a look again in slow motion. The buck reacted to the sound of the release, and the arrow went right over its back. Contrary to what a lot of bow hunters might tell you, the deer didn't duck the arrow. That hunkering down is the motion any deer makes when getting ready to take that first bounding leap from a standing position. So all of you bow hunters can learn something from Will's misfortune. Aim low in the vitals, and even if the deer does react to the sound of your release, you should still bring home the bacon, or venison, I guess. Now you just saw Will miss for the second time, and by now his case of buck fever has passed the critical stage. And through all of this, the buck keeps coming back for more. But that just goes to show you the power of calling, and how it can work to your advantage even on the wariest animals.
25 yards.
Okay. There goes arrow number 3, and a miss by that many feet as well. By now, poor Will's nerves are as shot as the many arrows from his quiver, and still that buck isn't ready to leave.
Get ready, here it comes.
Who knows where shots 4 and 5 went? Finally, that buck gathered up his doe and sauntered off into the thicket. Maybe he realized Will was out of arrows and the game was over.
Don't break.
When it comes to being lucky, you and I are just that. We're lucky that North American Hunting Club members Bob Bruner and Denny Hartman decided to share some super footage from their once-in-a-lifetime Quebec caribou hunt with us. Now remember as you watch this, Bob and Denny aren't professional cameramen by trade, so there may be some missing pieces to their week-long outpost adventure. But it's still one heck of a trip, and I know you'd hate to miss it.
Everybody, this is Monday. Everybody's got one so far. John has his 2, and I got my 2. We're just up back of the camp, scouting around some of the area we're hiking in. spotted one up front here. Even down in front of us. It looks like a pretty nice one. Oh, he got him. Huh?
One's growing into the other one.
He's got double shovel.
Yeah. I think yours might be wider, though.
Yeah, but as you got more fingers, boy, that's a nice one.
Looking at the size of those racks, it's almost incomprehensible that they can grow that big in only 5 months, from April to August. And when it comes to the biggest of the bunch, these Quebec Labrador caribou are just that. The world's record scored just over 474 Boone and Crockett points, making it the largest of the 5 subspecies ever taken. However, on average, the barren ground subspecies is the bigger of the two. Its B&C minimum score of 400 versus 375 for the Quebec Labrador shows the difference.
Everybody kind of shot a half-decent small bull. Today, the big ones came, and boy, they came. Like I said, all it is a matter of just taking your time and picking them out. And not getting anxious like we all did the first ones we seen. Everybody knew what they were looking for, but it just, they didn't want to go home empty-handed, so they took their first one.
As you just heard Bob lament, "If only we would have waited," is a common phrase I've heard uttered at countless hunting camps from the Arctic to Alabama. And the truth of the matter is, if you've plunked down your hard-earned cash to hire a reputable guide, and you choose not to take his advice, well, whose fault is that? But happily, all of Bob and Denny's buddies came away with 1 trophy caribou each, and hopefully, a lifetime's worth of mountain-class memories. But the true success of any day spent afield need not be measured in points or pounds, but instead in precious personal moments forever frozen in time. Now I'd like to thank everyone who made it possible for us to share this hunting odyssey with you. First to Will Primos and the entire Primos Calls staff. They've always got a good story or two to share with us, and I can't wait to see the next video they send our way. To Larry Weishin for taking the time to explain the how-tos and what-fors of rattling. To Randy Scheck of Easton Arrows for that breathtaking slow-motion arrow footage. To Mark Nissen of Trail Visions in Glendale, Wisconsin, right there in the middle of that great woodcock country. And a special thanks goes to North American Hunting Club members D.V. Smith, Bob Whitman, Mrs. Nancy Morrill, Bob Bruner, and Denny Hartman. That was some great video you sent us. And to you, Will Reeves, keep your chin up and your sights low and you'll do just fine. And now before we go, I'd like to fill you in on a great wildlife organization and the fact that you're a part of it. And best of all, Doug promises to keep it brief.
Thanks, Bill, and yes, I promise to keep it short. Hi, I'm Doug Graham, the Executive Director of Wildlife Forever, the nonprofit conservation affiliate of the North American Hunting Club, with some information I think you'll find interesting. Did you know that when you became a member of the North American Hunting Club, you were doing more than just joining a great organization made up of your fellow hunters from all across North America? Because, you see, a portion of your membership dues goes directly to Wildlife Forever, which in turn uses that money to create challenge grants that match state and federal funds to assist a wide range of worthy organizations working on a multitude of worthwhile projects, some of which I'd like to keep you updated on here on these Hunting Odyssey videos, so you can see for yourself just how those donations are being spent. One of Wildlife Forever's most recent efforts was to try to save some very ecologically important land from going under the developer's shovel and turning into another shopping center or something. But thanks to you, the North American Hunting Club, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and the Nature Conservancy, I'm happy to report that a 455,000-acre parcel of land in Utah, known as the Book Cliffs, will never be subdivided or paved. Instead, this rugged wilderness will be passed along to future generations of hunters and outdoor enthusiasts as an everlasting legacy to our commitment to preserve and protect remaining wilderness areas and their inhabitants. It should make you feel good to know that long after you and I are gone, the elk, the moose, the deer, the bighorns, and the bear will have a place called the Book Cliffs to call home. Thanks.
And finally, please take a moment to listen carefully to our last guest and his important message for members of the North American Hunting Club.
Hi, I'm Steve Burke, President and co-founder of the North American Hunting Club. I'm here today to talk to you about the future of hunting as I see it. When my father, Paul Burke, and I first started this great organization, our short-term goal was to provide club members with the type of hard-hitting, authoritative, and informational articles that hunters want to read about. Simple enough. From there, we listened to your ideas and suggestions and added such features as bits and pieces, hunting reports, field tests, great gear giveaway, and more. And we must have done something right because the North American Hunting Club has now surpassed the 600,000 active member mark. And while no two of you may share exactly the same shooting or hunting preference, we are all dependent upon each other when it comes to securing the very foundation of the future of hunting. Let's face it, we hunters are in the minority when it comes to the total U.S. population, about 15 million versus 240 million. And out of that non-hunting group, less than 1 million are bona fide, card-carrying, money-donating anti-hunters who want to strip you and me out of every form of hunting as we know it. Many challenges to hunting have been fought in the courts recently, and unfortunately, the antis have succeeded, usually through legal wrangling in either canceling or delaying a number of established hunting seasons that have been set forth by state biologists as sound wildlife management tools. And every time one of these special interest animal rights groups manages to block a hunt and you and your hunting friends sit idly by and let it happen, well, you've got no one to blame but yourselves for not getting involved. And little did I know 16 years ago that today I'd even have to be asking you to take a stand and speak out on the positive aspects of hunting, because it's those 200 million non-hunters we need to reach and to teach. But we here at the North American Hunting Club can't do it alone, even if our 600,000 voices were to speak as one. You have to get involved on the local level if we're to spread the truth about hunting and put an end to the antis' agenda of letting nature take its own course. Because that course was altered forever when the Pilgrims first brought firearms to the New World. But through prudent game management practices and the willingness of hunters to follow with strict adherence to special seasons and bag limits and to pay for the privilege of doing so, we've brought most game species back not only to huntable populations, but to all-time records, as in the case of the white-tailed deer and the wild turkey, thanks in no part to any group opposed to hunting. So come on, do whatever you can to help promote and preserve our great American hunting heritage. Do it as if its very future depends upon it, because it does.